Good evening, everybody. My name is Baroness Maggie O'Donnell. I am in the Middle Marches here in the Middle Kingdom. I've been in the SCA for almost 25 years. Mundanely, I have been involved in one way or the other in EMS for about 25, 30 years. My class tonight is about applying crisis response care in the SCA. So what that is, if you're not familiar with the terminology, is a lot of you may have heard of critical incident stress management or critical incident stress debriefing. And basically what it is, it's a way to help folks who have been involved in a critical incident work through their feelings, their emotions, their grief. And we're going to talk about applying some of those techniques to the SCA specifically. I have been very passionate about critical incident stress management as someone who has been on the receiving end of critical incident stress management, as well as someone who has taken the training and is a member of my peer support group at my current employer. So let's talk about a couple things. Part of the reason I brought this to the SCA was because back in October of 2018 here in the Midrealm, we had an event that involved a death, an unexpected tragic death at the event during an equestrian activity. So I reached out to the Seneschal, Kingdom Seneschal at the time, Mistress Catriona, and I said, hey, I'm not sure if it'll help. I have these skills, and I'm happy to, assist you guys in whatever way that I can. We did end up creating a group, talking to several of the folks who were immediately involved in the incident to kind of help them work through that. So I'm going to give you some definitions. A critical incident is defined as a powerful or overwhelming event that lies outside of the range of usual human experience. It has the potential to exhaust one's usual coping mechanisms, resulting in psychological distress and disruption of normal adaptive functioning. Crisis intervention is emotional first aid. What separates critical incident from post-traumatic stress, which is something we hear a lot, especially involving our veterans, is that post-traumatic stress is a normal reaction in a normal person to an abnormal event. And critical incident stress typically occurs and has a very short period of time, whereas post-traumatic stress disorder, as I'm sure you're aware, can have very long-term effects on an individual. So some incidents in the SCA context that would be considered a critical incident that might require crisis response care would be an unexpected death or severe injury to a participant at an event, a fighter practice, or a meeting. I know that there have been several instances, in addition to Master Terrafin's death, we've had some unexpected deaths involving royalty, either at an event or on the way home from an event. I know of at least 3 cases of fighters who have had massive heart attacks in the middle of a fight practice. That would be that can be considered a critical incident. And then a sudden, unexpected, large-scale disaster or weather event that requires emergency response beyond the usual or prepared for plan that an event staff might have. My example that I have is Gulf NATO. You expect some severe weather, but that was kind of an extraordinary case. There was a lot of damage. A lot of people were really shaken up and traumatized by that. So Critical incident stress management is specialized acute emergency mental health intervention that is designed to provide emotional first aid to individuals and groups who have suffered a significant traumatic and/or psychological event. It's a system of education, prevention, mitigation of the effects from exposure to a highly stressful critical incident. And I've told you the differences between critical incidents and PTSD. So I am going to upload onto the Facebook page here after our talk a list of common stress reactions to critical incidents. It can be any variety of things. They can be emotional, physical, behavioral, as well as spiritual. People will be angry. They'll have grief. They'll have fear. They can have rapid heart rate changes, nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, breathing problems, hyper-awareness. It can affect decision making. It can cause sleeping problems. It can cause preoccupation with the event or the trauma, which is a pretty common one. People will have alcoholic outbursts. They can have anger, disassociation. They can even question their faith. So in terms of being a seneschal or a marshal or anyone really, if you're aware of a critical incident that has happened in an event or meeting, we really want to keep an eye on those folks who are immediately involved, right? So event staff, people at the event who are close to the person that happened to. So some of our goals are choosing the best intervention at the right time for the right target group. So what we want to do is we want to first identify the abnormal event or critical incident. We're going to identify potential individuals requiring immediate intervention. And then we're going to identify the best way to offer those individuals assistance and resources. So one of the things that we use in CISM is called the SAFER model. Stabilize the situation, acknowledge the crisis, facilitate the facilitation of understanding, encouraging of adaptive coping mechanisms, and restoration of independent functioning or referral for continued care. So the first thing you want to do is you want to reach out and you want to establish a line of communication for the affected members to check in on them, see how they're doing, how are they reacting to the critical event. In the incident with Master Terrafin, we identified the folks who were immediately involved and we reached out to them. We created a private group on Facebook. We invited them along. We told them to invite anyone else that was at the event that they felt might be significantly affected. And we opened up a line of communication. We asked them how they were feeling, how they were coping with the event. I gave them the list of, things that they needed to look out for. And the big thing is a lot of times just let them talk. Let them know that they're supported. And then just let them talk. Because a lot of times talking out their grief is going to be the best thing for them. And that's a really good time for you to actively listen. You want to encourage them to talk about their thoughts and their reactions. You want to validate their feelings. What's important to them. Even if it doesn't seem like it's a critical part of the situation to you, it might be to them. Encourage expression. Encourage them to discuss things with their peers, with their family members, with other people they feel comfortable talking with. Teach them some stress management techniques. Going for a walk, making sure they're eating healthy, making sure they're not relying too heavily on alcohol or other substances to hide or mask their grief or their pain or their distress. You want to give them something to do for themselves. And then the other thing you want to do is you want to follow up with them. Typically, what happens, for example, in the EMS and public safety world, is if we have a severe critical incident, we try to make contact with that group of people within 8 hours. We try to set up a meeting, invite them to attend, and that's the big thing. You invite people. You don't say, you have to go to this. No one should ever be required to attend. Some people just don't want to talk about it. Some people deal with grief and traumatic incidents in their own way. And that's really what we want to encourage. We want to acknowledge what they've been through. We want to encourage them to work through their way. Other things we can do is we can offer them resources to recognize and cope how they're feeling and reacting to a critical incident event. Like I said, I've got that list, and feel free to copy that list. I can give you some other links for some handouts for stuff in relation to coping mechanisms for critical incident. You want to enlist the help of members of a CISM or critical care experience to help with a diffusing or a debriefing event. If you need to, if you don't have anybody in your area, you can reach out and say, if you know people who are in public safety in your local group, or even your barony or your region, you can say, hey, do you have training? Do you know anyone that has training? Can you recommend for me, some local or regional critical care organizations to see if they can, come in, help you guys out with getting a debriefing or a diffusing for the situation. Encourage your active individuals, encourage the affected individuals to monitor for signs and symptoms of critical incident stress and PTSD, and to seek professional care to assist them with long-term. So what we do is, it's kind of like EMS for mental health, right? So we're there, we want to check on them initially, but we're not there to provide long-term care for them, whether it's, psychological care, if they need to see a physician because they're not sleeping well, if they have a substance abuse issue that crops up because of their inability to cope. So what we want to do is make sure we encourage them to seek long-term care from a professional. Remind the individuals that there's nothing wrong with them. That's really important. A lot of people think, oh my God, why am I feeling like this? Why am I acting like this? I don't understand what's going on with me. I don't understand why this is affecting me. So let them know that it's completely normal for them to be having the feelings and the emotions that they're having, and what they're experiencing is absolutely nothing to be ashamed of. If you're going to have a diffusing, that should happen within 8 hours of the incident, like I said. The goal of a diffusing is to eliminate the need for a formal debriefing and to improve the willingness of the individuals to communicate in a formal debriefing if one is necessary. It helps to mitigate the event. It accelerates the recovery process. It'll reduce cognitive, emotional, and psychological symptoms. And it'll also assess the need for a formal debriefing and other services if they are needed. So one of the big things, if you're going to have a diffusing or set up a group, is you need some ground rules. Rule number one is confidentiality. The people that choose to come to have a diffusing or debriefing, or come together in a group to talk about how they're feeling about an event, they need to know that they're safe. They need to know that if they don't want the whole world to know that they're having this kind of reaction to it, it's not going to happen. Like I said, we created a confidential group. It was only the people in that group who were talking. It wasn't publicized. We didn't, shout out to the world, hey, we're taking care of all these people. It was very confidential, and confidentiality is number one. Like I said, remind them that participation is voluntary. No one should be demanded to attend a debriefing or a diffusing ever. Here's another big one. No notes, camera, or media. We're not here to take notes. We're not here to keep track of who's felt what, okay? This is an open forum. No rank. So in the SCA context, there should be no rank. It shouldn't be, well, I am the seneschal, or I am a pelican, or I am the night marshal, and so this is how this has to go. There's no rank when we have this. We're all just people. We're all just humans. You want to provide the affected individuals, again, with a list of common stress reactions. You want to encourage them to share that information with friends and family, because a lot of times they might not see it in themselves. And it might take a friend or family member to pull them aside and say, hey, I've noticed these things about you since this happened. How are you feeling? What can I do to help you? If you want to talk about it. And then encourage them to talk to their reactions and with others who have experienced the incident. That's really important, because you might have a half a dozen people involved, but they're all going to experience that event separately. Excuse me. And then schedule a time to follow up and check in on how folks are coping, and offer continued support as necessary. I think we kept the Facebook group open for about 6 months so that we could, people could continue to talk to each other. We could pop in every now and then and check on them, see how they're doing. So, anyone have any questions?
No, but I think this is a great idea, and I would love to see more groups have, like, I don't want to say a crisis officer, but somebody who has this knowledge. I think every group should go through this training. I love the idea. I mean, hopefully we'll never need it again. But
hey, Maggie, I've got a similar question to what Maggie Mack just said. Is in incident. I remember when that incident happened with Tarifa and everything like that, and it was tragic, and it rippled throughout the whole society and everything like that, and people process it in different ways. And I'm wondering, and you said that, I'm glad that you had the resources available to do that, but sometimes, there's going to be a time. I mean, I remember a few years ago in Red Spears, when one of their members, there were several tragic events that happened, like back to back to back with a couple things, and the Baron and Baroness had to handle all of this grief all at once and everything. And I'm wondering if there's any, what you're talking about right now is very important, but sometimes you might need, this, all right, the Barons have to handle this in some way because they're like the leaders and have to reach out and everything like that. So I kind of like what you're talking about right now and all that. So.
yeah, I think they had 2 suicides in less than a year.
Yeah, they had a suicide and a murder-suicide. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
I think it's Char says that they work with a local community emergency response group, which has is a volunteer group associated with their county department of emergency management. They have a super useful resource. Exactly. Mm-hmm. What I would love to see is I would love to be able to help get something like that set up, whether it's regional, whether it's, at a baronial level. I think regional might be better because things are going to be different from state to state, right? So we might have a set group here in Ohio, but they might do things differently in Michigan or in Illinois. And so I think I'd kind of like to talk to the Kingdom Seneschal and see what I can do to help maybe get something like that set up. And then I'm certainly happy to see if I can work with the lady that helped us get our group set up at work to see about having some kind of formal training, that might be we can look into. So
I think that the Kingdom Seneschal has some special deputies for different things. I think this could definitely be a new deputy that's created. And again, it's something we hope we never need, but it would be nice to kind of have you in our back pockets if we do, because it takes a certain skill set to know how to deal with this for sure.
And I know in the past there's been disaster relief, deputies set up when the hurricanes happen down south and everything like that, and all that. So this is almost like a I don't know, not even SCA FEMA, that isn't even the right word for it here, but you're talking the emotional side of the crisis response and everything like that. And that it's important, but and you definitely have to have people in place who are sensitive to the emotional things that are going to be happening to these people and all that. So but when it happens on site, like you said, when the people on site that happened in that moment and stuff like that, they just, I don't know, how do you even like contain that in the moment and all that?
Right. And, we weren't able to contain that in the moment. We, I know that the event happened. I saw that it happened. I had several friends who were there. And so, within a few hours of that happening, you see people start posting stuff on Facebook, right? So, maybe that's something that we need to include in event setup stuff. In the event of some, we've changed the way we do things because of that event. People have to provide emergency contact now and stuff when they participate, I believe, in equestrian events specifically. I'm not sure about any of the heavy weapon stuff. I know that you guys, fill out a waiver. That's great. But I thought that I saw something where if you're going to participate in some kind of martial activity, you have to provide an emergency contact. Is that, Gwyneth, I know that you...
I'm a rapier marshal. I don't recall having to be required to provide that information when we sign in. We just have your standard waiver, roster waiver form. But that's more of a question for Uller.
I think that's a good idea, because that could easily be added to the roster waiver form.
Right.
Where the fighters are signing in, they could easily have a emergency contact name and phone number just right out there to the side for.
Right. I know. I mean, when you register for Penzic, they require emergency contact information for events, for big events, but small events, we really don't have that requirement for martial activities. Not in any paperwork I've seen or handled as a marshal.
It might be equestrian specific.
Could be. They're at much higher risk. Because you're dealing with a human and an animal, and 1,000-pound animal possibly doing something, and all that. So.
I think there's definitely room for, event planning to, especially if something like that, especially if we have, a big equestrian event or, even as something as simple as, I remember Baron Wars a few years ago, and we had that huge storm blow through, and we had tents flying and hail, and
the whole Middle March's tent sort of went poof.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Yeah. And then a couple years later, when the whole event got canceled because of flooding, because Gregoire's and other people's elevations were held at 2:00, and then they canceled the event. you know, because of flooding. I mean, they even called some of the flooding areas like Lake Rongwalder and things like that.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Not fondly.
Yeah. But that, you know, but that's a separate incident. That's more like, you know, whether it's more of the EMA, you know, the emergency response kind of things where you're dealing with fires, floods, things like that, you know,
Right.
rather than the emotional crisis part. So.
But yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. Like I said, with Gulf NATO, I mean, there were some people that were, you know, pretty shaken up emotionally about, you know, I know we had some people that were in tents that collapsed, and
Yeah.
buildings were shaking, and we, a lot of times we think, oh, you know, that's, yeah, it was, you know, it was crazy, but I don't see how anyone could be emotionally affected by that. But
well, you know,
hard
depending
for-
on how you've grown up in like Tornado Alley or something like that, yeah, that could be triggering.
yeah,
You know, I mean, especially, you know, if you're not if you're not used to dealing with weather events like that, you know, where us in the Midwest, we deal with storms and stuff all the, like, not quite that big, but you know, it's like, okay, it's a big huge thunderstorm, you know how to take cover, you know, because we're used to tornadoes more or less. You know, we've drilled in tornado response and things like that, but other people may have no frame of reference because they've lived in the desert, or you know, or they've dealt with other kinds of weather responses, which are like hurricane response, which is a different kind of reaction than, you know, that's more like you have a little more time than you do with a tornado. So yeah, it was yeah, was that Gulf NATO and all that, yeah, it was pretty traumatic. And then dealing with people getting injured and all that as well, you know, during it, when tents collapsed and all that.
it's hard to say what, you know, what you and I might not consider a critical incident, someone else may.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
why it's so important to look for, you know, the signs and symptoms. Like I said, I'll post this on the Facebook page. I have it separately here. I don't know if I can do that or not. So if I disappear, forgive me. Does anybody else have any questions or?
I this may be related or something like that, but I know you've talked about, you know, when critical events happen at an event, like you know, like with the accidents that we've witnessed and the tragedies and everything like that. But then there's another kind, I mean, sometimes someone is at an event where bad news has been delivered. Like they've had to have like I remember a long time ago when Edmund was king, I forget, maybe first or second time, and his father was ill and all that, and someone couldn't get hold of him because he was out camping or everything like that. And um, Duchess Lisa was seneschal at the time, and she actually called the county police to find him on site. It was like Push for Penzak or something like that a long time ago, to deliver personal tragic news to somebody rather than, you know, on site tragic events, things like that. And I know that's kind of separate, but I don't know if that's even relevant to some sort of incident response kind of a thing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it could be, you know, the other thing I thought about when I was talking about coming up with this is, you know, let's look at the incident with Jafar, right? He was not at an event. He was coming home from an event, but, you know, that's something that is, that was very traumatic for the entire kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and so you have to think about, you know, his staff, his immediate.
That wasn't Jafar. I think you're talking about Osis. Jafar actually died in the hospital.
Okay, Osis,
Yeah,
sorry.
Osis, yeah, died on the way home from Baron Wars.
Yeah.
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 Both former kings. One very tall and blonde, one not so much tall and not blonde.
So, you know, you have to think about how that, you know, how's that affecting people? How does that affect their staff? How does that affect, you know, people who were close to him? And sorry, I'm still trying to find this on Facebook so that I can share this.
Yeah, and I think you're right though, because actually both of those deaths really impacted people. Jafar, especially because he was prince when he died.
Hmm.
He not yet stepped up to be king the second time, and um, you know, he was so young, and it was very tragic. I think things like that, you don't have to be around to be profoundly impacted by a death like that, especially in the SCA community. I'm sitting here thinking about what you were saying, Maggie, about reaching out to the Kingdom Seneschal, and I'm thinking like, it would be kind of good to have like a crisis response team where you have some folks that you've trained maybe in each region or something, and they can be like little U's throughout the kingdom that could help people when something like this pops up. Drew and his Midlands buddies, they're in another time zone, so it might be nice to have like a Midlands person, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody that could even go to an event in that area, without too much travel, something like that. I don't know.
I'm a United Methodist pastor, and that's what we do in our area. We go through different levels of training, and then if a disaster crisis comes, we can, be dispatched from our area or go to other areas. And you hope it never happens.
Right.
But it does.
I was really kind of hoping this would last longer. I feel like I kind of blew through it, and
No, I mean, I think we can use time to talk through this and answer more questions and stuff. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
All right. Oh, this is cool. Yeah. So this gives us like more ideas about what to look for, like physical reactions even, which is not really something I had thought about. Yeah. Maggie, you want to walk us through this a little bit?
Sure. So these are, this says emergency personnel, but it can be anyone who's, been exposed to a critical incident. Physical reactions: gastrointestinal discomfort, headaches, chills, increased illnesses, shock, fatigue, nausea, dizziness, chest pain, tingling in the limbs, rapid heartbeat, cramps, breathing problems, sweating, impaired immune system. And this is stuff that may not happen all at once or right away. Could very much be a delayed reaction. I will tell you that the last time I was exposed to a critical incident, and I started experiencing some things, and I didn't even recognize it in myself. So I really started having the things that I really started dealing with is I was having problems sleeping. I was having issues with preoccupation. I'm down in cognitive reactions, preoccupation with the event or the trauma, hyper alertness. Those are things that that happened with me. Was really more cognitive than anything else.
Yeah, this is really, I think this is really helpful. It's things I hadn't really considered before. I mean, they seem kind of obvious now that I'm looking at them in print, but it just hadn't occurred to me. And our pastor can see here that there are spiritual reactions listed at the bottom too, which I think,
Yeah,
it's good to include those.
I think the big ones that you'll see, the big ones that you'll see people really talk about the most, that really kind of, the like standout ones are, people will talk about feeling guilty. They will talk about, feeling survivor guilt. Exactly. They will feel like, oh my God, I just felt helpless. I didn't know what I could do to help. And I just, they'll have nightmares. They'll have trouble sleeping.
I would say with Terafan's death, I was fairly close to that in my office as the Kingdom media liaison. So I was dealing with media from around the country who wanted a statement from us, you know, so I talked with John the Bear Killer a lot during that time. But I think that this sounds really horrible, but I was really glad that he was the one who did the incident that precipitated his death, because I was really worried about survivor guilt if someone else there had been the one to pull out, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go into graphic detail, but so I was glad for their sakes that they hadn't actually, you know, engaged with him or tried to do something that, you know, caused his death to happen more quickly. But yeah, it was terrible. And I'm sure that the people that you dealt with felt all of this. I know that I have some friends in the equestrian community who have felt a lot of the hyper alertness, and, you know, like the perfectionism, you know, it mentions that, where they're just really very, very attuned to every little thing that could go wrong. You know, even a couple of years later, as we're coming up on the 2-year mark, they're still feeling that when they're doing things in the SCA community with their equestrian. So it's tough.
It is tough. You know, and there's some stuff, like you said, that, you know, people might not recognize it. I didn't recognize it in myself, and I've had this training. We had a helicopter crash here in Central Ohio. It was one of our competitors. I was actually not working that day, but, you know, I've been dealing with the helicopter EMS community for most of my adult life. And so I really found myself being hypervigilant and really preoccupied with that event. And, you know, started having some trouble sleeping. I was having some issues at work, and someone was like, hey, you know, maybe you ought to take a couple days off, you know, talk to the EAP people, you know, our employee assistance folks.
Yeah.
Like, you just seem really off. And it took me a little bit to stand back and go, wow, you know, you're right. I didn't even recognize in myself that I was having these things. And so people might not. And so that's why it's good to have this list, so that, you know, as their friends, as their family members, you know, we know something's happened. We can, you know, be on the lookout for these kind of things.
Yeah. Well, I think this is really helpful. I think that I would love to see you teach this class, like I said, to like a point person in each group, whether it be the Seneschal, the Chatelaine. I don't know who would be the best officer for it, but I think it would be great for people to have this knowledge. I'm certainly going to share this document and share some high-level stuff with my group based on this class.
Good, I'm glad. And anybody else have any questions or have anything you want to discuss?
Maggie, this was awesome.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody tuning in. And I want to thank Master Andreas for reaching out to me and asking me to teach this class. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I'm on Facebook. Like I said, I'm in the middle marches. I'm fairly active. Just hit me up on Instant Messenger or Facebook Messenger or...
She's Lisa Grimm on the Facebook, though.
Yeah, Lisa Grimm on the Facebook. And I would be happy to discuss stuff with you. So you guys have a good night. And thank you again for coming to my class.
Thank you, Maggie. This was great.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thanks, Maggie.
Good job.